Hey everyone, it's Simone Watson, and today I want to talk about critical race theory and how it has been banned from schools recently in many US states. I also want to talk about how this affects the bookish community and what the bookish community can do about it. So, I woke up to this news, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I saw on Twitter that it must have been yesterday. I saw on Twitter that critical race theory was banned in Florida. I grew up in Florida and I live in Florida right now. It's where I did all my years of public school. And um, at the time, I had heard the term critical race theory, but I actually didn't technically know what that meant. So I had to look it up. I had to do some research, and I was surprised when I found out a little bit surprised when I found out what critical race theory is, because it is something that I have accepted as the truth for a long time. And I was like, I didn't even know that this was being referred to as a theory, like as a theory. You know what I mean? Like I just accept it as something that's true, so I'm going to tell you because I still 100% believe that this is something that is true. So critical race theory states that racism is a systemic issue, that racism is not just something that happens on an individual level as far as like people being prejudiced, but that racism is built into systems, and in particular the systems of the United States. And I was like, yes, racism is a systemic issue. I, you know, have been coming to understand this. I've come to understand this over the years. Um and so for that theory to be banned is really upsetting and troubling. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what critical race theory is because I got this from a resource. So the resource I will link below, it is an article called A Lesson on Critical Race Theory by Janelle George. This is on the website for the American Bar Association. Um, and so um, she talks about how Kimberlé Crenshaw is the person that coined the term CRT, for critical race theory. I'm not sure if she coined the term critical race theory or if she's just the one that shortened it to CRT, but Kimberlé Crenshaw is someone that I highly recommend you look up. She did coin the term intersectionality, and that's something that is like really important to understand also. So this article lists four principles of CRT. So first it says, I'm not going to read you the entire paragraph, but just the main point of each, the main like idea of each point, basically. The first point says recognition that race is not biologically real, but is socially constructed and socially significant. The second point says acknowledgement that racism is a normal feature of society and is embedded within systems and institutions like the legal system that replicate racial inequality. And then it goes on to say this dismisses the idea that racist incidents are aberrations, but instead are manifestations of structural and systemic racism. And then the third point says rejection of popular understandings about racism, such as arguments that confine racism to a few, quote unquote, bad apples. And then it says CRT recognizes that racism is codified in law, embedded in structures, and woven into public policy. CRT rejects claims of meritocracy or colorblindness, quote unquote. CRT recognizes that it is the systemic nature of racism that bears primary responsibility for reproducing racial inequality. All of that was the third point. And then the fourth point says recognition of the relevance of people's everyday lives to scholarship. This includes embracing the lived experiences of people of color, including those preserved through storytelling, and rejecting deficit-informed research that excludes the epistemologies of people of color. Okay, so let's kind of review this. Critical race theory. So, what we just read is that critical race theory is saying race is not scientific, but it is significant. So, what we're saying is that Science didn't literally say, like like there is no scientific evidence to support race, the concept of race. However, so it's saying race is a social construct. However, we shouldn't ignore it on that basis. We shouldn't say, "Oh, it's a social construct, so let's just ignore it." No, it is a social construct, and because of its construction, so to speak, and because of the way it has been treated, it is significant. So for us to just say, oh, it doesn't matter, that wouldn't be a solution to anything, basically. But we need to understand the social construct of race, acknowledge that that construct exists, and like basically understand its effects and like talk about what we need to do about it. So, um, yes, so it is a construct, but it is, as stated here, socially significant. And then that racism basically is like they said, woven throughout our like societal structures in the United States. Um this doesn't say if the theory is specific to the United States, but I think that I think it is defined as being specific to the United States, but I think that you could also apply the same principles to a lot of the world. Um, but this is a, it is true and it is very evident that racism is systemic, that racism is a systemic issue. When I was a child, we really weren't, how would I say this? So when I was a child, when I was in like say elementary school and stuff, we were taught about racism on a very surface level. And to an extent, this is understandable because we were children. But it is necessary to say this, and this was being said last summer when conversations about racism were happening in the wake of George Floyd's murder. It was being stated that like children of color know that there's racism because when you are, I'll talk specifically about being black simply because I know this from experience. I know this from lived experience. But I think that if you looked at other groups of other BIPOC groups, you would find something similar. But I know specifically about being black. When you're black, you do experience racism as a child. And sometimes you may know that that's racism, or sometimes you may not have the language to describe what it is. Like you when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, you may not really be able to say like this is racism or like, but like, but you do experience it as a child. And so just off the bat, to say that children shouldn't know about racism or children shouldn't know what racism is or that it exists, this is ignoring the fact that children of color do know that racism exists. And again, speaking from experience as a black person, um, black parents know that their kids are going to face racism. And I just want to say this carefully. Black parents throughout generations, like let's say throughout the 400 years of the oppression of black people in the United States, black parents have known that this is something they couldn't fully shield their children from. Black parents have known that sooner or later their children were going to face racism, and they couldn't stop that from happening. So yes, black parents do tell their kids things about racism, but that's because black parents know that you need to know these things to protect yourself. And some of these things, you know, some of these things we can't stop our kids from learning. our kids, as in black kids, we can't stop them from, unfortunately, facing racism firsthand. So, but like, we have to be ready to like have an uncomfortable talk whenever it comes up that, oh, something happened and now like kids are asking these questions to their parents. We all have had these moments. All black people have had these all black Americans. Maybe I should not say all black Americans. I don't know all black Americans. In general, most black Americans have had moments. We have had moments in our lives where we were confronted with racism in a new way, firsthand. And like the first of those moments is in some ways the hardest. And it usually happens when you're a child. But there are also forms of racism you may face as a child that you don't even know, like you don't even know that that was racism until years later. Um the point is that black children cannot be shielded from racism. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because the idea that, oh, let's not teach about racism in schools because children shouldn't know about racism. There is either this idealism in thinking that children won't know about racism. Like if someone is saying children shouldn't know about racism, children shouldn't be taught about racism, they're either looking at this idealistically, not realizing that children who are BIPOC already know about racism or are going to learn about it somewhere, whether they learn about it in school or not. They're either idealistically not understanding that those people are going to know it, or they are really buying into the white default and that like the experiences of white people are universal, and therefore if you're one of the lawmakers voting on this and you're white and maybe when you were 7 you didn't know that there was racism, um that you think that 7-year-olds don't know that there's racism. And this is a huge issue because again, it's about the white default. It's about thinking that because white children don't understand something, no children understand it. But I would go so far as to say white children know more about racism than like lawmakers may think. Like children are perceptive. So even that assumption that white kids don't know what racism is and they shouldn't, and we're going to just ban it from the schools, no, that doesn't work either. Like nothing about this works. So let's just basically accept for a moment that children do know that there's racism. Children do not always have the vocabulary to talk about racism. They don't always know like all of the ins and outs and all of the nuances of it. But just saying children should know about racism, like that's not possible. Okay. But then you get into like, okay, like are children experts on racism? No, they're not experts on racism because I feel like someone's going to say, "Oh, well then it doesn't need to be taught in schools if children already know." No, because there are so many misconceptions here and like okay, because parents cannot stop because parents of BIPOC children cannot stop their kids from learning firsthand about racism. It is very important that this is talked about in schools so that BIPOC kids, for many reasons. Number one, BIPOC kids need to have the language to understand what's going on. Okay, but two, everybody needs to know what racism is so that we can dismantle it. Everybody, everybody needs to understand. Okay, like, and it's okay. I don't know. I feel like I cannot tackle this in one video because this video is gonna get long, but there's still gonna be so much more to say. But understand that everyone needs to know what racism is because we need to see where the problems are in the system so that we can fight against those problems. Denying that those problems are there, that doesn't work. That has never worked. Okay? Denying that the problems are there doesn't make them go away. And so I'm really, really angry about this. About this decision to ban CRT from schools. But I'm trying to contain I'm trying to contain my like fury that's in my mind because I want to explain this as calmly as possible. But understand that this decision is racist. Actually, maybe I should have just led with that. This is racist. The reason for this decision, the reasons that we're being given are that critical race theory makes white people feel bad about being white. I feel like I feel like I'm trying to think of how to say this carefully. There's this phrase like the benefit of the doubt, that sometimes you give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think sometimes I have given people the benefit of the doubt too much. And so the people that are saying, oh, we need to get rid of this theory because it makes white people feel bad. Some of those people I'm I don't know if I'm be really honest. I don't know if I can give those people the benefit of the doubt. If you're saying we can't talk about racism, which is a true thing that exists, but we can't let kids know that it exists because it's going to make white people feel bad, like how much of the benefit of the doubt can I give you by by benefit of the doubt I mean me believing that people don't understand how truly harmful that is. Like that the people saying this don't understand how wrong that is because it is prioritizing white people's comfort above BIPOC's rights to life and liberty. Remember life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Remember the Declaration of Independence. Remember that thing that we just love to like trot out every Independence Day or like every day of all the time. The thing that you love to teach kids about in schools. You love to teach kids that these white people signed this thing saying that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You are so focused on telling kids that somebody signed something saying all men have the right to life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness, and now we're going to turn around and say that you cannot tell these children that those same people that signed that document are the same people who robbed other humans of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because of the color of their skin. You don't want these children to understand the blatant hypocrisy, okay? The hypocrisy that was that deliberately went into the founding of this country. Because here's the thing, this was not accidental. This was not an oops. This was not a matter of the slave owners, and I hate to even say slave owners because I hate to even refer to my ancestors as slaves or as having been owned, because yes, my ancestors were enslaved, but some people will try to make that be the entirety of your identity, and by some people I mean white people will try to make that be, oh, they were slaves, oh, they were like as if that is in any way any type of excuse for any of the travesties that happened in the context of slavery. But you know what? Okay, I'm going to rewind it. Okay, the idea that these slave owning white men signed this thing saying all men are created equal, it's not a matter of them having been so idealistic and ignorant that they just like forgot that black people are people. Like they just didn't they just forgot that when they said all men are created equal, they just forgot that they forgot that like some men are not white. Like no, they didn't forget that. And honestly, I'm okay. I'm black. If you're going to talk about issues concerning indigenous people, I really want you to listen to indigenous people, okay? Listen to what indigenous people have to say. But understand that the very founding of the United States, the like I don't even the abhorrent treatment of indigenous people who were already on the land that white Europeans decided to claim and call America, the way that the indigenous people were treated and how it flies so in the face of any of the things that the founding fathers want you to think is like their treatment of indigenous people flies so in the face of what they want you to think America is. And like, this is a problem. It is so upsetting that we've just been taught a lot of lies. And CRT is true. CRT is something that puts things into a true perspective. And now you've got lawmakers trying to push that out in favor of more lies. Like, that's not right at all. That's really, really not right. It's messed up. And it's not a matter of like, up until this point, our school system has just done an excellent job of telling us about race and racism. Because, in my experience, they really kind of glossed over slavery, and when they were educating us. They glossed over a lot of the things that I know about Black history. I know because of my parents. And yes, it is a good idea for, no, not good, it is absolutely necessary for parents to participate in the education of their children, but don't act like what the education system does is not important, because what the education system does is important. And critical race theory is a way of acknowledging the wrongs that have been done to Black, Indigenous, and people of color by the systems that are in place in this country. And so to push CRT out of the schools is to say we no longer wish to acknowledge those wrongs. We no longer wish to like really see the struggles and the pain and like all of these bad things that have happened to BIPOC as a direct result of the systems that were put in place in this country that are systems that need to change. Because, and why we don't, it's saying we don't want to talk about that because that makes white people uncomfortable. Okay, can you understand how I am like so mad about this? Because I am not saying that I believe that white people are just bad people. That is not what CRT is about at all. And some of the people that are acting like they think it's about that, they don't think they're just like, I'm sorry. It's frustrating because systemic racism, like last summer, so just about 1 year ago, we were starting to see more and more people talk about systemic racism. In that case, it was specifically anti-Black racism that was being brought up in the wake of George Floyd's murder and some other incidents. And I just like, we can't leave the conversation in last summer. We can't be like, okay, we talked about it for a couple months and it's over. Because for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, it's not over. It's not over. It's really, I do honestly feel like crying, because this is saying to BIPOC, specifically to BIPOC children, it's saying that the oppression that I'm sorry. Okay. It's saying to BIPOC children that the oppression that you've been through and that people in your I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna stop the camera here. It's saying that the oppression of BIPOC people doesn't matter that much, and that fighting against that oppression doesn't matter that much, or it doesn't matter enough for us to be informed. But that what matters more is keeping white people comfortable. And it is saying to white people, it's saying to white children that because you are white, you can control narratives however you want to, and you can ignore reality. It's saying that white people have this choice to just ignore things that make them uncomfortable, even when those things are dangerous and harmful to other people. And if something like this really succeeds in keeping children unaware, and especially white children, if it succeeds in keeping white children unaware of racism, that is really a problem, because people who are ignorant about racism, especially white people who are ignorant, people who don't understand racism as a system, like, they can and often do unknowingly contribute to that system. That's why it is so important for people to know about systemic racism, because if you don't know about it, like I said, especially if you're white, if you don't know about these structures that were put in place, you like are very likely to do something that contributes to the system that to the system that disenfranchises and oppresses people in that I'm sorry, you are likely to unknowingly do something that contributes to the system that oppresses BIPOC. That is what I'm saying. And the bookish community, because we are people who claim to value education and value information, being informed, and understanding different people's perspectives, and using you know books, both fiction and nonfiction, to understand people's perspectives. Like, we need to understand that, like, this is a problem. And I'm concerned about this in general, but I'm also concerned it could very much lead to certain books being taken off of the curriculum. It could lead to the curriculum of English classes and literature classes being, manipulated in a certain way. And I said this on Twitter, but people get so up in arms about the classics. Like, don't tell me that the bookish community doesn't care about education, because the bookish community gets so up in arms about the classics, and some people are so up in arms about defending their faves. And like, you have to understand that literature and social justice, these things are not separate. These things have always informed each other and been informed by each other. So this does affect the bookish community, and we need to talk about it. Like, we need to talk about this. This is like really upsetting. It's really upsetting, and it's concerning. And so, I don't know, in the comments, like, please, like, just tell me what you think about this. Let's keep the conversation going. You can tell me, you can recommend books to me if you want, books that would, like, I don't know, books that would help with an understanding of critical race theory. Um, I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna need to make a part 2 to this video. I just feel very, very strongly about this, and it's sad. It's a sad situation. And so my question to the bookish community is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.